Well, hello and welcome to the This Awesome Life podcast, a collection of stories that point to purpose. I'm Brandon and I have an awesome life, and I'm not sorry because so do you. In every episode of This Awesome Life, we'll talk to a friend, we'll listen to their story, and we'll hear about the moments in which God has shown up in their life and pointed them forward in their calling. So let's dive in, explore some stories, and celebrate this awesome life. Today on the show, I've got my friend Gian Lemmi. Gian is the tennis director of operation for both men's and women's tennis at Liberty University. The teams that Gian has assembled and coached through the years have amassed more than 100 wins and 3 regular season conference championships. With all of his spare time, he also serves as social media coordinator and project manager for John Acuff. If you don't know who that is, Google him. But anyway, I'm so excited about our conversation today with Gian. Let's jump in. Well, hey, Gian, I'm so excited to jump in today. As you know, we talk a lot about purpose on this podcast, and I've been kind of wrestling with that lately. And I feel like it's a bit over, I'll use the word mystified, where everyone's looking for this like perfect answer to the question, what is my purpose? And it's got to be super specific and super niche. And I just don't think that's true. I think that our purpose comes from our stories and how we learn and grow along the way. So I'm excited to hear some of your story today. And just about something maybe random that you learned a lesson through or learned a little bit more about who God's created you to be. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Gian. Tell us a story, man.
When I was about 15, 16 years old, I was already playing a lot of tennis in my life and had these goals of moving to America to play college tennis. In Brazil, you couldn't really go to college and play a sport at the same time. Is just very difficult. They don't support that kind of behavior.
Interesting.
And so I had a few friends that had already come to America, older friends that had already come to America to play college tennis, and they're like, this is incredible, you know. And so that was my goal ever since probably 13, 14. But at around 15, my mom was like, well, if you're going to live in America for 4 years, you're trying to commit to that lifestyle, why don't you go 1 year and as an exchange student in high school and see if you really like it, you know? And so I was like, yeah, any excuse to move to America, I'll take it, you know?
Sure. Okay.
And so I was 16. My mom had to sell her car to afford the program, and she sent me. So I ended up living with a host family in Connecticut, Fairfield, Connecticut, which is a completely different world than São Paulo, Brazil, where I was raised my entire life.
Wow.
The houses were massive, perfect yards, you know, no trash on the streets, no homeless people. It was a completely different world. So first day I called my mom back and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm coming back. Like, this is it. I'm going to live here forever. So had a blessed experience there. Was not a Christian at the time. I believed there was a God there. There was just lacking that personal relationship with Christ in that moment. But had an incredible year. Really tried to stay in Connecticut even after that year was over, but was forced to go back to Brazil to finish high school, and then started the college hunting recruiting process. And it was through that moment where I started to see God work in my life, even though I didn't have a personal relationship with him. I was able to see him provide in ways that I've never seen that before.
Wow.
I was struggling to find a good college that it was good enough for me to play tennis at. I was humbly speaking, I was very good at tennis. And so I didn't want to settle for a school that wasn't going to push me to be the best I could be. But Absolutely. At the same time, my parents needed to be able to afford it, right? So I ended up talking with Liberty University, which at that time the program was growing. They had just gotten a brand new coach. But I had never heard of Liberty University, had never heard of Lynchburg, Virginia. But it was coming late into the process. So it was about mid-February, early March, and I just made a promise to God, even in my own small understanding of it. I said, God, If you give me a school by the end of March, if I get a commitment, if I sign the papers by the end of March, I will cut my hair, right? So between 14 and 16, my hair was really my identity. I had really long hair, very hard to believe it, but I had hair all the way to my shoulders. I would put it in a ponytail with a bandana. It looked so cool playing tennis. But that was my identity. No wonder I didn't have any girlfriends around that time, so that was didn't hit me that way. But yeah, so you're not gonna believe it, but March 31st, Liberty's coach emails me and says, "Hey, we decided to take you in as a scholarship player. Here's how much you're gonna have to pay." My parents could definitely afford that, and so April 1st, as if it was April Fool's Day, I had to shave my head and show up to school with a shaved head. And so that moment was the kickstart into my faith journey right there. Coming to Liberty, very into faith, right, and developing ourselves in the faith. And so that was just an incredible experience to be at a place where it feels like a bubble. All these exterior problems do not happen here. And that was another unique experience where I did call my mom that first day and I said, I am not coming again. But this is for reals. Like, I'm going to find a wife. I'm going to find a way to stay in America forever.
Well, there you go. And so, man, I guess your experience at Liberty was really good, because tell us, like, now you're there, right? You're one of the coaches.
Yeah. So I played for 4 years, did really well. Okay. And right around graduation, I got engaged to my wife. We started dating freshman year, and we stayed together throughout all 4 years. She did break up with me for a week, and then she decided to take me back. But that's maybe for another podcast.
Maybe another day, yeah.
And then we, so we got engaged middle of our senior year, trying to figure out what we're going to do. She was studying to be a nurse. And then Liberty offered me a GA position to be a grad assistant on the women's tennis team. They were just hiring a new coach just for the women's tennis program, and he needed an assistant, but he didn't have time to hire somebody. So they said, hey, take Gian for a year, and then if you like him, you can keep him as a full-time assistant. If not, just let him go. And so that year I worked like crazy, recruiting, operations, everything. And ended up the coach really liked me and kept me around for 10 years. And so we were one of the longest tenured coaching duo, head coach and assistant coach in college tennis. We were together for awesome. 10 years, which is almost unheard of in any college sports, right? Because everybody's trying to climb that ladder, right? Everybody's trying to go to the next school and the next school. And we were just so satisfied at Liberty, not in a comfort zone kind of way, just scared to go out, but just feeling really fulfilled, right? And so
how'd you find contentment in that? I know personally, like I'm like you, or like that. I always want to be moving towards the next thing, growing, developing, and not that you wouldn't be growing and developing, but even positionally, like you said, climbing that ladder. How'd you find contentment in that position?
Well, when I started coaching and he came in to be the head coach, we were really bad. Like, we were a bad tennis team. Not saying that to diss the previous coaches, but into what Liberty had to offer and the results we were getting, there was a massive opportunity for improvement there, right? So it took years, right? So every year we were doing firsts, that we called it. So like, first time we won a conference match. First time we won a match against a Power 5 school. First time, So that always kept us going, right? All the way up to, now where they're constantly in the national rankings, and it's just cool to see, just looking back, our walk-ons currently, the players with no scholarship would have been the best players on our team that first year,
Oh, wow.
That was the level. And so, it's just, that was what motivated us. There was so much for us to achieve still within the university. And Liberty always took good care of us, right? And we always felt appreciated, felt supported. And I think that's what matters. I think that's, as employees, and then, I transferred that kind of security into my players, where they felt secure. They felt like they weren't getting pushed out to go transfer to another school just because they weren't playing. Right. They felt appreciated. And so, I think in 10 years that we were here, we transferred maybe 2 girls out, and that was
Oh, wow.
because they wanted to get out because they weren't playing. They didn't see any playing time. We didn't push
Yeah.
them out. They're like, hey, I want to play. I'm good enough to play somewhere else. So then let me just go. And we're like, yeah, we're not going to hold you here,
Yeah,
but
for
we're
sure.
also not going to push you out.
Yeah, that's hard in college athletics. People want that playing time. They want, and again, it's about climbing that ladder, getting that next
Yeah.
step.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, tell me about this hair thing. So, like, you had these long flowy locks,
Yeah.
and
So
that was the deal.
yeah. So fifth grade. So I went to a K through 12 Catholic school
Okay.
in Brazil, right? But we didn't have many rules. We didn't have, we had to wear a uniform, but it was pretty relaxed uniform. We didn't have, it wasn't that strict. But
Okay.
fifth grade came around, and this new kid came into school, and he had these long, curly, just wavy, not
Yeah.
curly, but just
Okay.
wavy, long hair. And all the girls were just attracted to him. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I've been with you since kindergarten, And then this guy shows up in fifth grade, and now you're interested in him. So that put a bug in my ear. So probably it was maybe seventh grade. I was like, I'm gonna just let my hair grow, you know?
Yeah.
And then it didn't work out for me. My hair is just very oily, just straight, no curls. Like it
Yeah.
didn't. But at that point, I was like, well, this guy's going on dates in sixth grade. I didn't want to go on dates in sixth grade. And I think it was just part of that growing, trying to figure out who I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just trying to stand out. And then
Right.
it just became my identity. Like that just became, oh yeah, Gian, the long hair guy.
Gotcha.
And so I kept that out for probably 3 to 4 years, and then I started cutting it back just slightly. When I got to Connecticut as an exchange student, it wasn't up to my shoulders, but it was still pretty long, where I could still do
Yeah.
a ponytail, almost like a pigtail at the back.
Yeah.
And yeah, but that was the story behind it. The guy turned out
Yeah.
to be really one of my best friends. But that moment when he showed up to school and all the girls were just all over him, I was like, wow,
Swooning.
I want that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. I have tried that as well, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work for me. My hair
I
is
think
very
we've
thin,
all I think
very
we've
fine.
all men have tried that, anything with our hair. And so
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Hey, what were some of the wins from that 1 year in Connecticut when you came as an exchange student? Like, what was it that was really like? I know you kind of mentioned some of the exterior factors, but what
Yeah.
was it that really like tied you to this place and really let it kind of grab a hold of your heart?
Yeah. I was always very disciplined. Um and I know probably Americans don't think that Americans are disciplined in their way of life and how they do
Sure.
things, but they are much more disciplined than Brazil. Like, you've
Okay.
just watched like a World Cup game where Brazil plays, and it looks like everything is happening all at once. It's pretty, they're doing their own things, they're dancing on the field and doing that stuff. And you see other teams, America, England, Germany, and they're all so strict, disciplined, they run only certain
Right.
ways. But that's the entire population of Brazil. It's like they just
Yeah.
do it, they're so talented, and so they just rely on their talent altogether to get things done. They make U-turns when they're not supposed to make U-turns. They cut the red light, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's just chaos. So I always felt like I didn't belong there. I always felt like
Gotcha.
there was something else. And when I moved to Connecticut, where everybody respected the traffic laws, obviously they're outliers, but compared to Brazil,
Sure.
it felt just unbelievable, right? Everything
Yeah.
worked. The train said it shows up at 7:15. It shows up at 7:15. Like the bus stop was always on time and all those things. And I was like, man, this is where I belong, right? And
Gotcha.
then when I moved back to Brazil, it just exposed
Oh,
that
yeah,
gap
going back.
that I had felt, right?
I hear you.
And then when I moved back to Liberty, where it's even more of a controlled environment, where everything is disciplined, and there are a little bit more rules, and then I really thrived. I really did. I think sometimes people think, oh, I like to be free. I don't like to, put fences around myself, but that's what
Yeah.
gives you the freedom to flourish.
Oh man, that's so good. I talk about that. I lead a team at the church I work at, and sometimes they're just like, "Why are you, so strict with these policies and stuff like that?" I'm like, "Because when you know the fences, you know where you're able to run, and
Yeah,
when you're able to truly like run within those boundaries, you're free to do, some of your best
yeah,
work because
yeah,
that's where you flourish. You don't have to
yeah,
worry about asking permission for this or asking for forgiveness, more likely, but you just
yeah,
get to run. So
yeah.
that's
And
so
I think
awesome.
people do crave, discipline. They do
Yeah,
crave some type of structure. I
yeah,
think it's
absolutely.
always like, have you ever heard of the habitudes? Um, who are the
The
habitudes?
concept sounds familiar.
Yeah, so it's like pictures. They use pictures to teach leadership methods.
Okay.
Tim, oh man, Tim, I can't remember now his name, but he does a
Yeah.
great job with Gen Zs and Gen Y, Y, J, Z,
Whatever
whatever
letters we're on
letters
now.
we're
Yeah.
at now. Um, and he does he uses these pictures, and it has one about a like a flood and a river, right? So the
Okay.
flood, there's no control, there's no boundaries, it's just going water everywhere, right? And it's just destruction. But a
Yeah.
river has banks on the side, right? And it's flowing all in one direction. There's no river that flows two directions, it's always one direction. And
Right.
that's what I picture. Like, just put some boundaries on there, and then whatever goes inside those boundaries is free game. And that's, I think, when people flourish.
Yeah, that's so good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so you said you saw God provide in that year, for the first time, really. What were some of the things that really kind of made you think, oh, God's showing up here? This is evidence of him, or, the things that strengthen your faith during that time?
Yeah. I just think I just saw things, and it hasn't happened like that my entire life. And even
Yeah.
the way, after I got saved my freshman year, um, December 10th, 2008, right before my birthday, um, because I wanted to be a new man, right? And so I said,
Yeah.
oh, the day before my birthday, I'll become a new man that way. Um, but I just saw him, open doors in sequence, and I think he was already trying to call my attention to him. Um,
Yeah.
just like, hey, wow, this is incredible. How does this happen on March 31st when I made a promise, April 1st,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? And then the way that he opened doors to just get to Liberty, and then when I got to Liberty, just meeting my wife. I didn't know she was going to be my wife, but I met her the day
Yeah.
before
That'll do it.
freshman year started, right?
Okay.
And it's just like, that's insane. That never happens, right? So then
Right.
I was her first boyfriend, and so we took it slow. I didn't know what it was to date in a Christian way. I knew the Brazilian way, but
Yeah.
then, she taught me, how to just cherish her and pursue her. Um, and then, right after I got saved, my parents were divorced when I was 5, right?
Okay.
And my dad remarried a woman a few years after that and stayed married for a while. And then my mom went on and off with several guys, but she had married a guy right before I came to Connecticut. So she was married maybe three years or so.
Okay.
And it was really, I got saved weeks later. Both of my parents got divorced to their respective,
Oh,
you know?
wow.
And so
Yeah.
everything is falling apart there. And then I had that moment where, wow, God, now that I truly gave my life to you, this is what you do.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have those moments where God removes certain things in our lives so that he can do something greater, right? And
Yeah.
so I
That's so
think,
good.
and that was a lesson that I learned later, not in that moment
Yeah.
when things were
Yeah.
happening. I was very mad at those moments, because my life was going great. Even when I even hadn't accepted Christ, everything was working just fine. I
Yeah.
accept Christ, boom, you know? And I heard a quote that really stuck to me around that time. Said, there's only 3 seasons in life, right? You're either in the middle of a storm, you either just got out of a storm, and the third one is you better buy an umbrella because there's
Yeah.
another storm
Yeah.
coming, right?
Right. Right.
And that really stuck to me. And sometimes those are micro seasons. It's like a day is great, then the next
Yeah.
day is completely terrible, or it's months. Sometimes it's years of prosperity, and then there's years of storm in there.
Hmm.
But I keep that always in the back of my mind, because It's true. It's true. And sometimes God removes things to really test you if you're going to pursue Him or if you will move in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you said with that. I say on a regular basis, like when God says no, it's always so that he can say a better yes.
Yeah.
And it's so hard, especially in my world of, I do a lot of work with kids and students, like youth ministry, and nobody wants to hear that. They're like, why would God do X, Y, or Z? And it's always to say yes to something better as long as you
and sometimes
pursue him.
it's and we have to understand that it's his better, right? It's not
Right.
our better. And so
Exactly.
that can also be confusing and frustrating, where you may not even have an idea of what better looks like for you in that stage of your life, you know?
Yeah, for
Even
sure.
with John, when I started working with him, so I started probably last May.
Okay.
And I decided for Lent in 2022, I decided to say I'm gonna quit social media. I'll do a social media fast, right, for 2022. I did not know John needed help. I didn't know anything, right? I just felt called to just delete your social media. And I fasted for social media. It's very hard those first few days, right? Because you're on
for
it
sure.
constantly.
All the time.
And I love sports. Yeah. And now that's how we consume sports, right? It's just Twitter, Instagram, highlights, those things. And so I went through that Lent season, read books on social media fasting, those things. And no kidding, the Monday after Easter, right? So the first day after Lent season is over, I get an email from John's assistant asking, hey, Gian, do you know of anyone who's interested in working for John? And that was a season of transition in my life. I was looking to move out of coaching already. And so I was like, that is unbelievable. That's another moment where I'm like, are you serious, God? Like, I went 40 days without social media, and now, I'm having this opportunity to apply for a job to be a social media coordinator for a person that I followed for years,
Yeah.
And that was just a truly blessing of God, just rewarding. Hey, you quit this idol, right? You gave that up for me to pursue me for 40 days. Now look what I can do, right? And that was better in his sense as well as my sense. And sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah, sometimes just better in his sense, and we don't see it until way, way, way later.
Correct.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Gian, I really appreciate you being here with us today, man. Like it's so good. I feel like we hit so many things. We've talked about contentment and patience and storms and all that good stuff. So yeah, so much good here. Thank you so much. It was so great hanging out with Gian today, man. That guy has a lot of wisdom and has walked through a lot of interesting circumstances that have led him to where he is. There's a lot of things in there that we could pull out and talk about. One is just to trust God's timing. It was so cool to hear his story about how there was a deadline in place for when he needed to have figured out where he was going to go to school. And he had all these things in line that, hey, if I'm going to need for this to line up and this to line up, and to see God orchestrate the things that he needed to provide for him in such a way that he was able to chase his dreams by moving here to attend Liberty is awesome. Trust God's timing. The second thing was just like the contentment piece of it, celebrating the firsts. They were regularly, him and his head coach were able to stay together and stay content in where they were in a good way for so long. They didn't have to chase what they felt like was the next big thing because they found contentment. They found things to celebrate along the way. Maybe you're not where you want to be, but if you can find things to celebrate along the way, small victories, key wins, those are going to be huge in helping you stay content and keep moving forward. And then the final thing that, man, I thought was the biggest thing the biggest takeaway we could have is that when God says no, he's always, always, always walking us towards a better yes. And it's our job to trust him. It's our role to follow in those steps, follow that path, and know that ultimately God has our best interests at heart. And so I want to encourage you, when you feel like God is closing a door, that know that he is leading you towards a much better yes. He's leading you towards something that's going to be way better in the long run for you and for the kingdom. And it may not feel like it in the moment. Man, sometimes it's so hard to keep that in our minds. Like, it may not feel good in the moment, but God has something way better in store for me. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us on today's episode of This Awesome Life. It's a collection of stories that point to purpose, and that's what we get to celebrate. Celebrate our stories and celebrate our purpose. If you want to stay further connected with This Awesome Life, check the show notes. We've got a lot of resources down there for you. You can subscribe to the This Awesome Life blog or connect with me on social media to see all the other things that are going on. We'll see you next time.